quickly before we get into the anatomy and structure of a good prompt, which I think is the most helpful mental model for understanding kind of what makes a good prompt. I just want to cover a few common prompting tips that you'll hear. These are very basic. This is going to be a pretty quick little lesson here. But one of the key things that I really want to drive home in this course is that you don't have to over prompt. So I think that prompt engineering has become so popular and ubiquitous, and everybody has their take on it, and you hear it everywhere, right? Prompting, prompting, prompting. You don't always have to have these absolute crazy prompts. Like earlier in a couple earlier lessons, we've referenced the system prompt that Anthropic has for Claude, right? See how long this thing is? You don't need a prompt that is this complex. I mean, we're still going here, right? This is a gigantic prompt. If we were to pull in, let's actually pull in OpenAI's tokenizer. This isn't necessarily the tokenizer that Claude uses, but this just gives us a rough estimate, right? This is almost a 5,000 token prompt for every request that goes into Claude, and you just don't necessarily need that for every single task, right? Sometimes just asking a model to summarize a document, sometimes that's all you need. And the point that I want to make with not over prompting is that you only need to improve your prompt if needed. If you from a very simple prompt are getting results that you're happy with, don't overthink it, right? And this is again, I'm gonna use the word intuition so much in this course because the longer you work with a model and the longer you prompt things, not only do you get better at writing prompts, but you get better at knowing when to write prompts, right? You get better at knowing if you even need to put a bunch of mental energy into making a prompt very specific and complex and adding a bunch of context, right? Often, just saying, "Hey, can you explain this?" is good enough, right? Maybe you're learning something new, right? Maybe you're taking a class about physics and you just need to say, "Can you please explain this to me like I'm 10 years old?" Sometimes that's all you need. You don't need some fancy XML prompt that says break things into these sections and use this tone and format it exactly like this and here's some additional context about the course I'm taking, right? Sometimes you just don't need that and it's overkill. And this is one of those things that I see people struggle with sometimes is that they almost, there's sort of the phrase, and paralysis by analysis, or I may have that backwards. I'm recording this very late, you guys. But the point is, I sometimes see people and they're just sitting there and they're struggling to write the prompt, and it's like sometimes they forget to ask, do I even need to be iterating on this prompt, or is the one I'm using good enough, right? If I send some message off and I'm getting a good response, like what's the point of putting a bunch of effort into writing a prompt, right? So the point is just don't over prompt. Only improve your prompt if you need to improve your prompt. If you're not getting the result that you want, or something's off about how the model is getting back to you and the types of assistant messages you're getting back and things like that, then go into the prompt factory and go to work. But if you're not running into problems, don't overthink it, don't over engineer it. Just start simple, right? Start with a clear, basic prompt, add complexity if you need, and you're going to find that for a lot of the tasks in your day-to-day workflows, you don't really need elaborate prompts, okay? So the question is, what if I do need an, a complex prompt? What's kind of the escalation prompt there? So obviously try the simple prompt first. If the results aren't good, improve the prompt. And it's really just a process of iteration, right? We're obviously going to talk more about how you should structure your prompts, and we're going to do a bunch of the case studies, right? So that you can see me kind of going along with you, showing you step by step how perhaps you should approach this problem. But it's really just about trying to, you basically have three options when it comes to prompting. It's basically keep trying to improve the prompt, try the prompt with a better model. Okay, we're going to talk about models in a couple lessons here, so don't stress too much about models. Or try and break the task that you're trying to get the model to do into smaller parts, right? Sometimes you're just trying to feed the model a task that's a little bit too big, too complex. And this is something, of course, that I would suspect not be a problem as these models keep getting better and better and better. Some of the the complexity that a model can handle is obviously going to go up over time, but that's, kind of another option that you have. So, really, just the tips that you just want to keep in mind as you're writing these prompts, and this is very similar to the same things that we talked about in the Dwar rule lesson, right? It's be direct, state your request clearly, put important instructions first. Use, you want to use a very active voice. You want to be, you're basically being the model's boss a little bit, so you want to be a little bit commanding. You want to be very direct, rather. You want to break down your instructions so that it's very clear what's going on. You want to provide context, right? Who is this for? What's our goal? What are the constraints that we have? And then you also really want to learn from the responses that the model comes back to you with, right? You want to pay attention to what's working. You want to take, mental note of, okay, this prompt got better when I tweaked this. Okay, so that means maybe on this other prompt that I have, if I need to get a little bit more performance out of it, I could kind of try that technique. You just kind of want to make mental note of these things. And again, I'm going to use the word intuition again. You just, as you iterate more on these, you get into these feedback loops, to use an AI analogy, as your own mind gets trained, just like these models get trained, you get better at this. So these are just a few kind of common prompting tips and framings that I just want to talk a little bit about. Most importantly is kind of what I talked about at the very start of this lesson, which is just don't over prompt. If you don't need a complex prompt, don't drive yourself crazy trying to make everything perfect, right? Perfect is sort of the enemy of good in this case, and you only need to kind of go into the shop and hone in your prompt if you're not getting the results that you want.